My name is Neil Cannon, and I am a development consultant that has been involved in economic and community development and finance in New Hampshire for like 40 years. And recently, a year and a half ago, the city of Franklin was able to procure some federal funding through the Rural Development Agency to hire a what they call a downtown development coordinator. So they retained my services, and I've been here since beginning of January 2016. And one of the first things I did, and my job is to encourage development, encourage investment in downtown, whether that be private investment or public investment via state and federal grants, etc. And one of the first things I did before I started focusing on specific projects was to get to know the community. I spent about a month talking to downtown merchants, community leaders, getting to know what's going on. And what I can say is, having done this for a long, long time in a lot of different communities, there seems to be a spirit in Franklin that's alive. On the government level, it's led by the city staff, who is working very diligently to implement finally these plans that Dick talked about, instead of just stacking them on a shelf to make them happen and make investment happen, make community development happen, make more jobs and better jobs in Franklin, focused on the downtown, which I believe is the greatest resource. So Jim talked about Franklin's relationship with Perma City Life, who is sort of a de facto redevelopment authority for downtown. They're a nonprofit, and they had purchased 7 buildings. We were successful in our first grant to get money from the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. It was a $400,000 grant, and those funds are being used to improve the facades of 3 downtown target buildings that they own. Those monies would not have been available for privately owned buildings, but since Perma City Life is a nonprofit, we were able to do that. Now, some will say, why? What's that going to do? Well, number one, Franklin's historic district and architecture, to anybody that's traveled through here for a few times, is our signpost. It's one of our signposts. It makes us attractive. And any planning or vision statements that have been developed over the last 10, 15 years, when it looks at Franklin's future, says it's the downtown and the Mill District. And number two is that actually it is an economic development tool, because we've seen studies. The one I like to quote is a University of Wisconsin study, which found that in a facade program in Madison, Wisconsin, very similar to this one, retail traffic increased 30% after the completion of a facade program on several buildings. Excuse me. So what Franklin becomes, as Jim said, there's no land to develop big box or shopping centers. What happens is that Franklin's downtown becomes a pedestrian shopping area. That is complemented by let's say it becomes a shopping area and service area. How do we get people here? Some of the leadership in this community, other than I, because they had to convince me, because I'm a typical old-fashioned economic developer. I mean, I say, and spend money, get somebody to come into your town and hire people and pay the taxes. That's how it works. And, so I focused, and we are focusing on some of the major buildings like the J.P. Stevens Mill. We're talking to potential developers to come in there and redevelop it and spend a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, to build the tax base and bring high quality housing and bring jobs. But at the same time, the vision was, back in the 19th and early 20th century, what drove Franklin? Well, it was the river. It operated the dams, who operated the mills, who employed thousands of people. And it's running right through our downtown. And the traveler doesn't know that. They don't know that there's that river back there. They cross it coming in, but they don't know how exciting it is. So, under the leadership of Marty Parashan, and the state, formerly the State Department of Recreation, and Department of Resources and Economic Development, did a study. And what they looked at is this thing called whitewater parks. And we found that there's none in New England of any substantial. There's natural rafting during the spring when you have whitewater. But in the southern states, and especially in the West, there are a lot of these parks that have become the lifeblood of their communities. We're very fortunate to have the river right there. Look at Concord's downtown revitalization. It's all focused on the main street, but you have an interstate between the downtown and the river. Most communities have an interstate or something blocking them. We don't have that. We have some old mill buildings, but the river is very accessible. So basically the study looked at what our position in the market would be, and they did that by looking at the success of about 6 case studies that they looked at, six different whitewater parks. And they found, based on that case studies, look at our demographics, the population within an hour's drive versus 2 hours drive. They basically said that this little old whitewater park in Franklin could attract 161,000 visitors a year. 161,000 visitors to Franklin. Well, those visitors, just like if they were going to a ski area, or they were going to, Clark's Trading Post, or whatever they're going, they're going to spend money. They spend money first on accommodations, second on the attraction themselves, though this will be free to see this, or to use this, and third on retail, entertainment, restaurants, groceries, things like that. And it's a big chunk of money. Those 160,000 people will spend about $6 million a year, $6.4 million a year, in the area on those kind of things. And they'll spend another $4 million. That $6.4 million will generate another $4 million in spending. That is huge. It's very, very significant. And so that's where we came to the Whitewater Park, because it's like the river powered Franklin, and it's going to revive Franklin. It's not just water flow, as Jim said. I thought that was great what Jim said. Not just water flow, it's cash flow. I know, that's sort of neat. That's really the thing. So right now we're focusing on several things, but the top of the heap is the Whitewater Park. And we have applied for some federal money to do the engineering. Both Perma City Life and Mill City Park, which is the nonprofit organization that Marty heads up, Marty Parashan, have contributed the matching funds to it. So the total grant would be matched by $85,000 to do all the engineering. Now you can imagine the difficulty of that. It's not just putting a drawing out for a building. We got to do surveys of the wetlands. We have to, in the flood area. We have to do surveys of the bottom of the river, because you have to do, You might want to rearrange boulders and everything like that to make it, to channelize it to make a constant velocity in certain places. And you got to get all those permits. It's a big task, but it's not, because we've been in touch with the various state permitting agencies. It's not one that is daunting, because we're going to hire experts. We think it can be done. We think we can be in a position that between 12 and 18 months from now we'll be fully permitted and going to construction. And it'll be maybe a year to do the construction. So we could have a park and people starting visiting here within 2 years. And that's very exciting. I do also want to add that what sort of Jim referred to, it's not just grant money we're chasing. We're chasing investors and non-conventional financing to support stuff. There are programs that encourage people to invest in Franklin as opposed to other communities. Franklin is classified by the feds as a distressed area. That makes certain sections of Franklin eligible for what's called new markets tax credits. I don't want to go through it, but it's a substantial subsidy to a developer in terms of tax credits that wants to build something or buy something and rehab it. You also have historic tax credits because downtown Franklin is in a historic district. Between those two, you can reduce the cost of a project. To renovate an old mill, you're talking $150 a square foot. Well, if you can reduce that to $100 by tax credits, it all of a sudden becomes attractive. So we're also working on those things with several potential developers. So it's both things. It's the private side, and it's the public side of chasing grants to the city or through Perma City Life. And we've been successful in that, and I think we're going to continue to be successful. The excitement of the built around the water park, I have no doubt that, as I said in our meeting earlier today, with the steering committee, obtaining the funds for building it is going to be a lot easier than obtaining the funds for designing and engineering it, because there is excitement there. And finally, I'll echo what Jim said in terms of Franklin Savings Bank. I've been around a lot of communities. I ran a statewide organization, and Franklin Savings Bank really puts to work what a community bank is, and they've been supportive, not only with their enthusiasm but with their money. I don't know that in any community I've worked at, and the local bank would go out on a limb and write a mortgage loan for a nonprofit, untested, like Perma City Life, to buy 7 buildings. And that's the key, because as those buildings improve and as they're tenanted, the value improves, and we start not only to create jobs, but we also create a more expanded tax base in a community whose tax base is very, very precarious. So that's about it, unless you have any questions.